She was waist-deep in swamp water when she saw it. An outline of rust, just barely breaking the surface. Most people would have walked away. But Claire Weston wasn't most people. What she pulled from that murky bayou wasn't just a van. It was a sealed time capsule from 1968, holding more than just engine grease. Inside waited a story that had been buried for decades, and fixing it would mean facing the parts of herself she thought she'd left behind. Before we crack open the story, drop a comment and tell us where in the world you're watching from. And if stories like this restore something in you, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's journey might just take you further than you ever expected. The mud sucked at her boots with every step, thick as concrete and twice as stubborn. Claire Weston had tracked a rumor out here, miles off-grid into the Okefenokee swamplands, the kind of place where mosquitoes outnumbered people 1,000 to 1, and the air hung with the smell of wet moss and old stories. The client hadn't given much detail. Just a message scribbled on the back of a gas station receipt. Old van near Dead Creek Bend. Looks like it's been there decades. That was enough. Claire had dragged out worse from deeper places. But as she crested the bank and saw the shadow of the thing half submerged in dark water, she froze. It wasn't just old. It was ancient. A first-gen Toyota Hiace, long abandoned, sunk halfway into the reeds like some mechanical grave marker. Its body was coated in slime, windshield cracked straight through the middle, one wheel missing, the others swallowed by years of erosion. Still, the shape was unmistakable. Boxy, blunt, and somehow proud. She stood there for a long time, hands on her hips, breathing heavy. Her red ponytail was already matted with humidity, her shirt streaked with the muck of the hike, and her gloves soaked through. But something about the van held her gaze. She didn't know why exactly. Maybe it was the stubborn angle it leaned, like it was refusing to tip over completely. Or maybe it was the faded white paint barely visible beneath the green mold. She took a slow step forward, then another, until the water reached her knees. She tapped the side panel. Solid. Rapped the window. Hollow echo. Then she peered inside. The back seats were gone, replaced with plywood framing, scattered tools, a rusted kettle. Someone had been living in here once, not recently, but long enough to leave a presence. On the wall, written in faded marker, were 3 words: keep moving, always. Claire blinked. It wasn't the kind of thing vandals left behind. It was personal, intentional. And just like that, the Hiace went from junk to puzzle. She turned, squinted into the horizon, and saw nothing but trees and sky. No roads, no tire tracks. No signs of anyone who might have brought this thing here. It was as if the swamp had kept it secret until now. By the time she returned with her truck, straps, and a winch, the sun was dipping low and the bugs were in full rebellion. It took hours to get the van free. Every inch fought back. Roots tangled in the undercarriage. Sludge caked in the wheel wells. But Claire didn't stop. Not when her arms burned, not when the sky turned black, not even when the Hiace finally broke free from the mud, with a sickening groan that echoed through the trees like a ghost sighing. She stood there, panting, drenched, staring at the hulk she'd dragged from the swamp like some modern-day archaeologist. And for the first time in a long time, she felt it, that flutter in her chest, the one that whispered, "This one matters." She didn't know how, not yet. But something told her this wasn't going to be just another rebuild. This van had a past, and if she had the guts to face it, it just might change her future. The next morning, Claire rolled the Hiace into her shop on a borrowed flatbed, the tires still coughing up swamp water as they hit the concrete. The bay lights flickered overhead, illuminating years of decay and silence packed into a van barely clinging to its shape. It looked worse under clean light. The roof sagged slightly, as if the years had pressed down too hard. The paint had long since surrendered to rust and algae, and yet Claire couldn't stop staring at it, not with disgust, with recognition. There was something about this van that tugged at her, a shape, a memory, something half-formed from childhood that refused to surface. She stripped off her gloves and ran her fingers down the side panel, over the faint outline of a logo that had once said, Hiace Camper Deluxe. Her dad used to talk about them, back when she was just a grease-streaked kid who sat cross-legged in his garage watching him build a dune buggy out of scrap metal. Toyota made 'em like tanks, he'd said once, but soft inside like road cabins you could live in if life fell apart. She hadn't thought about that in years. Not since he died. Not since she'd packed away the photo albums and the smell of 10 watts 30 that lingered in his flannel shirts. Claire grabbed a crowbar and eased open the rear doors. They groaned like a warning, but she pressed forward. Inside, it was worse than expected. The floorboards were rotted, the old kitchenette collapsed on one side. Mold bloomed across the ceiling in angry patches, and a wasp nest the size of her fist dangled near the rearview mirror. She ducked instinctively. Then, crouching low, she began to dig through the wreckage. Behind the passenger seat, she found a rusted-out ammo box. Inside, a stained road map of the Southwest with a route marked in red pen, a cracked lighter, a ring of keys, and a single Polaroid. She held it up to the light, careful not to smudge it. A woman, early 30s maybe, stood barefoot next to the same van, only it wasn't sunk in swamp water then. It gleamed under desert sun, painted sky blue, a surfboard tied to the roof. The woman's hair whipped in the wind. She looked free, wild, alive. On the back of the photo, in faded ink, were 2 words, for her. Claire stared at the image until the edges blurred. Who was she? Where had she gone? What did this van mean to her? The questions came fast, unrelenting, like gravel under tires. But there were no answers. Not yet. Just a hunch. The same one that dragged Claire out to the swamp in the first place. This wasn't just a rebuild. It was a recovery, and something about it hit too close to home. She hung the photo on her tool wall, just above her dad's old torque wrench. Then she stepped back and looked at the van again. The rot, the ruin, the buried history. She should have walked away. She had clients, projects, a schedule, but none of that mattered now. Because in this rusted shell, she saw something she hadn't felt in years. She saw herself broken, half buried, but not done yet. By midday, Claire had stripped most of the interior. What hadn't collapsed had to be cut out. She worked alone, as usual, not because she didn't have help, but because she didn't know how to ask for it. Her phone buzzed a few times with missed calls from old clients, a parts order delay, even a reminder from her sister about Sunday dinner. She ignored them all. The van had its hooks in her now, and something about it demanded full attention. No distractions, no half measures, just grit, sweat, and silence. The glove box was jammed. She'd left it for last. There was something about unopened compartments that made her nervous. Not mechanically, emotionally. They were like time capsules, waiting to remind you of what was lost. She wedged a flathead under the latch and gave it a nudge. Nothing. She tried again, harder. The old plastic creaked, cracked, then gave way. A small puff of dust drifted into the light. Inside were brittle insurance documents, a broken compass, a cassette tape labeled Highway Mix 72, and at the very back, a folded piece of paper sealed in a sandwich bag. Claire pulled it out, wiped it clean, and unfolded it slowly. It was a letter, handwritten, still legible. She read it aloud without meaning to. To whoever finds this van, I'm sorry. I really thought I'd make it back. If she's still running, please finish what we started. Don't sell her. Don't strip her. She's more than that. She's all I had left. The signature was nothing but an initial L. She sat down hard on the edge of the wheel well. The air in the shop shifted. The clanging tools, the buzz of the overhead lights, they all seemed to fade into the background. The letter was recent enough to be legible, but old enough to feel like a whisper from another life. Who had written this? And why had they thought they wouldn't return? She reached for the tape deck mounted on the dash, surprisingly intact despite the mold. She slid the cassette in. The motors squealed. Then, after a few seconds, Music crackled to life. The Eagles. Then Janis Joplin. Then Simon and Garfunkel. Songs from another era, playing through static, like a memory trying to crawl back into existence. Claire sat still, letting the music wash over her. She pictured the woman from the Polaroid, wind in her hair, freedom on her face, and imagined her driving across the desert with this tape playing, maybe with someone in the passenger seat, maybe alone. She wasn't sure what moved her more, the music, or the idea that someone had lived a whole lifetime inside this van before it became a wreck. That it wasn't just a machine, it was a witness. To love, to loss, to escape. Claire turned off the stereo and pulled her notebook from the workbench. On the first page, in thick black ink, she wrote, "Project. Hiace Resurrection." For her, and for the first time in months, maybe years, she didn't feel like she was fixing something for money. She felt like she was repairing a promise. It was a miracle the Hiace still had its original engine. A 1.5-liter inline-4, buried beneath a decade of sludge and corrosion. Claire stood over it, arms folded, her brow slick with sweat. It looked like something that should have been buried aluminum pitted from moisture, belts melted into tangles, and a family of spiders who'd clearly claimed it as home. She almost laughed. "You should have given up by now," she muttered, reaching for her pry bar. But deep down, she knew the van wouldn't make it that easy. She'd been wrenching since sunrise. The sky had turned from ink to gold to washed-out gray, and she hadn't eaten since a granola bar hours ago. She didn't care. Something about the Hiace kept pulling her back. Every bolt was a question, every panel a mystery. She'd found 3 more personal items stashed in hidden compartments: a carved wooden spoon tucked under the driver's seat, a charm bracelet in the ashtray, and an old matchbook from a place called the Long Run Diner, location unknown. The van was speaking in fragments, and she was listening. Claire drained the oil. What came out wasn't oil anymore, it was tar, black and bitter, thick with decay. But beneath all that mess, when she cranked the crankshaft manually with a breaker bar, it moved. Barely, but it moved. Her eyes widened. That meant the pistons hadn't seized. That meant the engine still wanted to live. She felt her hands shake, just a little. Not out of fear, out of disbelief. It was the same feeling she used to get working beside her dad on Saturday mornings. He'd always say the engine would tell you if it still had a heartbeat. "Just listen," he'd whisper, tapping his socket wrench like a tuning fork. Some of them whisper. Some of them scream. This one was whispering. Quiet, but clear. She spent the rest of the day tearing it down, bolt by stubborn bolt. The cylinder head was warped, valves crusted, but nothing was shattered. The crank was rusty, but straight. The camshaft worn but reusable. It would need machining, cleaning, new everything. But it was possible. That word lit something inside her. Possible, not practical, not easy, just possible. And for Claire, that was enough. By sundown, she was covered in grime. Her gloves were ripped, nails black, ponytail unraveling, but she sat in the driver's seat anyway, staring through the mossy windshield at the bay door, fingers curled loosely around the cracked steering wheel. She let herself imagine it, the finished van, painted clean, humming smooth, rolling over open highway with sunlight streaming through the windows. A van that had seen both ruin and resurrection. Behind her, the stereo crackled to life. She hadn't touched it. Just one note, then silence. Claire's breath caught in her throat. She turned. Nothing. No lights, no power, no reason for it to spark. But deep down, she knew. This van wasn't ready to die. And maybe, just maybe, neither was she. The following morning, Claire returned to the shop before the sun had even considered rising. The air was still, charged with that strange silence only found at 5:30 a.m. when the world's asleep and nothing yet has gone wrong. She unlocked the bay door and stood there a moment, sipping black coffee from a chipped mug and staring at the Hiace. It looked almost peaceful in the glow of the security lights, like a beast at rest. She almost felt bad about what she was about to do. She'd made a decision during the night. If she was going to bring this thing back, really bring it back, she'd need to strip it down to bare metal, gut the interior, sandblast the rust, reinforce the chassis. There was no shortcut, no clever patch job. It was rebuild or rot. So she started pulling. Screws, rivets, sheets of sagging insulation. The old floor had to be cut out entirely, half of it flaked apart like dried bark. But beneath all that, she found something unexpected. Taped beneath the rear subframe, tucked inside a vacuum-sealed pouch, was a folded packet of blueprints. Claire blinked. They weren't Toyota factory specs. These were handmade, detailed sketches, scale drawings, handwritten labels, plans for a complete camper conversion, using the Hiace as the base. It included cabinetry layouts, water systems, solar panels, even a pop-top design. Whoever had owned this van wasn't just living in it. They were dreaming in it, planning something long-term, something hopeful. She flipped to the last page, a signature at the bottom, L. Marin. The same initial as the letter from the glove box. Claire sat on the shop floor, dusty and stunned, the blueprints spread around her like a map of someone else's soul. She didn't recognize the name. She'd Googled it, of course, late the night before, half out of curiosity and half desperation, but there were no results. No missing persons. No blogs. No hint of where they'd gone or if they were still alive. Whoever El Marin was, they'd left behind a dream, perfectly preserved in ink and folded in faith. She looked up at the van. The same dimensions, the same frame. Everything matched. These plans weren't abstract. They were intended, meant for this exact machine. Claire exhaled, slow and deep, then reached for her notebook. She scribbled one word beneath her last entry. Why? Why had the van been abandoned? Why the letter of apology? Why hide the plans? But she didn't get long to ponder. The shop door creaked open behind her, and she turned, startled. Standing there, backlit by the rising sun, was a man in a forest ranger's uniform. Tall, in his 60s, with a weathered face and boots caked in dried mud. He tipped his hat. "Name's Harland," he said. "You the one pulled the van out of Dead Creek?" Claire nodded slowly. "That a problem?" He shook his head. "Not unless you believe in ghosts." She raised an eyebrow. "Come again?" He stepped closer, eyes flicking to the Hiace. "That van. It's been part of a lot of strange stories. People claimed they saw lights out there at night, music playing, a woman's voice singing through the trees. We never found anyone, never stopped looking either." Claire's spine prickled. Harland looked back at her. "That van belonged to someone who disappeared. Back in '89. No trace, just tire marks into the marsh, and a journal page nailed to a tree." Claire swallowed. "What did the page say?" she asked. Harland paused. "If you find her, finish it." Claire didn't sleep that night. The ranger's words replayed over and over like a stuck cassette. "If you find her, finish it." She paced her garage, barefoot on the cold concrete, the blueprints clutched in one hand, the letter in the other. She had rebuilt dozens of cars in her life, old pickups for ranchers, classic Chevys for parade floats, even a '72 Firebird someone thought was beyond salvation. But this wasn't about a paycheck or pride. This was someone else's dream, someone who vanished, someone who may never have known if anyone would carry it forward. By sunrise, Claire was working again, this time with a fire in her chest she hadn't felt since her father's funeral. She began reinforcing the undercarriage, welding in new cross members and bracing the frame to handle a build that was clearly meant to be lived in. She followed the blueprints religiously. Water tank placement, propane hookups, insulated paneling, it was all there. It wasn't just some hippie's fantasy. It was a full-blown engineering plan, sketched with care and precision. But some parts, the solar regulators, the sliding panel system, were outdated. Claire had to improvise. Update. Translate 1,989 dreams into 2,025 realities. Still, she kept the spirit of it intact. Where the plan suggested custom bookshelf near rear hatch, she used reclaimed barnwood from her father's old shed. Where the sketch read, copper sink, find one with character, she hunted one down at a salvage yard 3 towns over. Each piece added made her feel more like a partner in the build than a mechanic. Like Elle. Marin was still here, handing her tools from the other side. By the end of the week, the interior was stripped clean, prepped, and primed. She was just about to call it a night when the front bell rang. Claire wiped her hands, flipped off the grinder, and walked to the door. A woman stood there, mid-40s, gray streak in her bun, eyes alert. She wore a faded hiking vest, with patches sewn onto it like postcards from a life well-traveled. "You Claire Weston?" she asked. Claire hesitated. "Yeah." The woman stepped inside without waiting for permission, her eyes scanning the van like she was seeing a ghost. "Name's Joe," she said. "I used to know someone who lived in a Hiace like that." Claire's breath caught. "You knew Elle Marin?" Joe nodded slowly. "We hiked together, slept in vans, chased roads like they were promises. She called that van her sanctuary." Claire swallowed the knot, rising in her throat. "Do you know what happened to her?" Joe didn't answer right away. She stepped toward the van, placed her hand on its side, and exhaled. "She went into the swamp one night. Said she was following a voice. Never came back. They searched for weeks. I think she wanted to disappear." The garage went quiet, except for the ticking of cooling metal. Joe turned back to Claire. "But if you're rebuilding this, you should know something." Claire stepped closer. "What?" She had cancer. Didn't tell anyone for months. Thought if she built something beautiful enough, it would outlive her. She wanted to leave behind movement. That's why her motto was always, "Keep moving, always." Claire's eyes stung. She looked at the photo, still pinned to her tool wall, the woman with wind in her hair, free as air. Joe placed something in Claire's hand. A keychain, faded, bent. It read, "The Long Run Diner 1 more mile." Claire looked up. "I think she'd want you to finish it," Joe whispered. And with that, she turned and walked into the night, leaving Claire standing in the glow of the shop lights, heart pounding, hands shaking, and a sense that this build had just become sacred. Claire didn't say much to anyone for the next few days. She kept her head down, her hands busy, and the garage door locked, except for deliveries. The world outside could wait. What was unfolding inside her shop had nothing to do with commerce or clients anymore. It had become a kind of ritual, a conversation between 2 women who had never met but somehow knew each other. One had left behind blueprints, scraps, and secrets. The other, tools, time, and the will to see it through. By Wednesday, the flooring was in. Bamboo composite light, durable, and sustainable, layered over sound-deadening mats and anchored to a reinforced subfloor. The walls came next, padded with insulation and lined with soft pine paneling. A bench seat folded into a bed. Overhead cabinets, trimmed in copper, clicked shut with that satisfying little thunk. The kitchen area came together faster than expected. A 2-burner propane stove, stainless steel sink, water pump hidden behind a hinged drawer, all wired to a solar panel Claire had mounted to the roof herself. It was beginning to feel like a home. But what struck Claire most wasn't the beauty of the build, it was the story taking shape inside it. Every element she installed echoed with purpose. The bookshelf near the hatch, perfect for the trail guides, Joe said Elle Marin always kept. The copper sink oxidized just enough to give off a warm green halo in the morning light. Even the curtains, sewn from an old quilt Claire found at her mother's attic, felt like they belonged here, like the van was slowly remembering who it used to be. One afternoon, as she was mounting the sliding storage bay beneath the bed frame, a teenager wandered into the shop. Skinny, dark curls, backpack slung low, no sound except the jingle of his bike chain hitting the wall as he parked. "You the one rebuilding the swamp van?" he asked. Claire looked up. "Word travels fast." My grandma saw it on Facebook. Said you were turning it into a moving tiny house. Claire wiped her hands. Something like that. The boy stepped closer, eyes wide. That's sick. I want to live like that one day. Just go. Claire hesitated, then reached into the back of the van and handed him a wrench. Then start here. You ever used one of these? He shook his head. Then I'll teach you. From that moment on, he was there every day after school. His name was Matteo, and he'd never so much as changed a tire before, but he learned fast. Claire showed him how to wire LED lights without blowing a fuse, how to seal a leaky water line with nothing but heat shrink and willpower, how to really listen when something didn't sound right under the hood. And maybe more importantly, she taught him that building things wasn't about getting it perfect. It was about care, about intention. By week's end, the Hiace wasn't just a vehicle anymore. It was a vessel, not just for travel, but for healing. Claire stood at the edge of the bay, watching the sunset bounce off the fresh clear coat. The color was soft blue, almost exactly like the Polaroid, recreated from memory. Inside, the bench seat gleamed under LED strips. A string of travel postcards fluttered from a twine line above the kitchen window. In the corner, beside the spice rack, she'd framed the phrase, "Keep moving, always." She turned off the lights and locked up for the night. But as she walked away, she paused at the door and glanced back at the van. It didn't look like it had come from a swamp anymore. It looked like it was ready to go home, even if it didn't know where that was yet. Claire was tightening the final bolts on the roof ladder when her phone buzzed. She almost ignored it. Her hands were full, her sleeves rolled to her elbows, and her entire focus was locked onto this last detail that had to line up flush. But something about the call ID made her pause. Unknown number, out of state. She wiped her hands on her jeans, squinted at the screen, then answered with a cautious, "Hello?" A woman's voice came through, brisk and professional. "Hi, is this Claire Weston? You were recommended by one of our scouts." Claire furrowed her brow. "Depends who's asking. This is Aaron, with Van Life Expo. We're organizing the Southeast Showcase next month in Asheville. We heard about your Hiace build. The swamp rescue? It's making the rounds online. Someone posted progress photos in a van build group, and people are calling it the most emotional restoration of the year. It is not by braving." Claire blinked. "I didn't post anything," Aaron chuckled. "Well, someone did. And it's beautiful. We'd like to feature you. All expenses paid. Full display slot. You'll be next to some of the biggest builders in the country. Think you can make it?" Claire stared at the van, then at the ring of tools scattered across the garage floor. The thought of hauling the Hiace into a showroom, standing under spotlights, explaining why she rebuilt it, it made her stomach twist. She was good with machines, not microphones, but something in her said yes before she even realized it. A week later, she was pulling into the Asheville Civic Center, Matteo riding shotgun, nervously fiddling with the lanyard that said, "Apprentice Builder." The van hummed like a dream, every system working flawlessly, from the fridge to the solar array to the Bluetooth sound system that still played those crackling 70 seconds. Mixtapes from the original cassette. It was surreal. Rows of polished sprinters and converted school buses stretched across the venue, each more luxurious than the last chrome finishes. Pop-out kitchens, bamboo showers. Claire's Hiace looked small next to them. Simple. But it also looked like it had heart. As they set up, people gathered. Not just to admire the craftsmanship, but to hear the story. Claire kept it brief, just the basics. Found in a swamp, old blueprints, rebuilt to honor a stranger's dream. But every time someone stepped inside the van, they paused. There was something about the air in it. The way the light filtered through the curtains. The smell of pine and copper and old upholstery. It felt like a memory. A secret. Midday, a woman approached. Late 50s. Faded jeans, hiking boots, tears already in her eyes. "My sister," she whispered. This was her van. Claire froze. The woman placed her hand on the doorframe, just beneath the engraved phrase. "Keep moving. Always. Her name was Lily. She vanished in 1989. We never found her. Not a trace. Just her van and a journal entry we couldn't make sense of. Until now. Claire's chest tightened. The crowd hushed. Even Mateo stopped pretending to organize flyers. I thought she was gone, the woman continued. But standing here, it's like I can feel her again. Claire stepped aside. Want to sit in it? She asked softly. The woman climbed in and wept quietly in the corner seat. Not out of pain, out of release. When she left, she pressed a tiny gold locket into Claire's palm. She wore this every day, until the day she left. Claire nodded, unable to speak. Later that night, alone in the hotel room, she opened the locket. Inside was a photo of Lily, same as the Polaroid, and on the opposite side, a quote, "You don't need a destination. Just enough courage to go." The van show ended with applause and spotlights, but that's not what stayed with Claire. What stayed were the quiet moments. The strangers who stepped into the Hiace and left with misty eyes. The father who ran his hand along the cabinetry and whispered that it reminded him of the camper he'd built with his wife in '78. The little girl who curled up on the bench seat and said she never wanted to leave. And most of all, Lily's sister, who returned the next morning with a photo album, still wrapped in plastic from a flood years ago, and asked if Claire would like to see the woman behind the blueprints. They sat together on the curb outside the expo hall, flipping through water-warped pages. Lily as a teenager, barefoot on a beach. Lily in a jumpsuit, welding a hitch onto the Hiace. Lily with her arms around someone, another woman, laughing, lost in the moment. Her name was Cora, Lily's partner. She passed in '88. After that, Lily changed. Wandered deeper into the wild, searching, maybe running, maybe grieving, maybe both. She thought the road would help her breathe again, her sister said. But I think what she really wanted was to build something that could hold love, even after it was gone. Claire didn't speak. She couldn't. Her throat was tight. Her hands trembled just slightly as she turned the page to a photo of the Hiace early in the build, mid-frame. Lily crouched beside it with a notepad in her lap and a pencil behind her ear. She looked strong, determined, exactly the way Claire had felt these last few weeks, without even realizing it. Back in Glenfield, the shop was quiet when Claire returned. Mateo had kept it tidy, organizing tools with the obsessive precision of someone who now saw them as sacred. The van sat in the center bay, a little dusty from the drive home, but otherwise perfect. Claire reached up, unplugged the solar cable, and stood for a long time just looking at it. She didn't see rust anymore, or work, or even restoration. She saw a story, a completed one, but also a beginning. That weekend, she hosted an open house. Not a party, just a gathering. People showed up from town, former clients, old friends, even Father Denny from the community center, who blessed the Hiace like it was holy. And maybe, in some way, it was. When the sun began to dip, Claire stood beside the van and spoke. Not from notes, just from the chest. "This build wasn't mine," she said quietly. "It belonged to a woman I never met, but she left behind more than blueprints. She left a heartbeat in every corner of this frame. She taught me that fixing something broken isn't about making it new. It's about making it whole, even if the person who started the work never got to finish." The crowd was silent. Not in mourning, in reverence. Claire stepped into the van one last time. She turned on the lights, flicked the switch for the fan, let the cassette tape play through the hidden speakers. The first song, "Take It Easy," the one from day one. And then she drove. No destination, no plan, just the road, the hum of wheels, the open sky. She crossed the town line just after sunset, past the old gas station, the cemetery where her dad was buried, the high school where Mateo now planned to start a mechanics club. The stories didn't end here. They were still unfolding, still moving. As the stars blinked into view, she rolled down the window and let the night air in. One hand on the wheel, one heart finally at peace. Weeks passed. The story of the Hiace spread quietly. The way stories worth telling often do not through headlines or hashtags, but through people. Word of mouth. Shared photos. A gas station clerk in Mississippi said he'd seen it parked at sunrise, steam rising off the roof like breath. A campground owner in Tennessee left a note on the windshield. "Thank you for reminding me that some things are worth finishing." A barista in North Carolina mailed a postcard addressed simply, "To the woman in the blue van, your story saved my week." Claire didn't seek any of it. She just drove. Some nights, she slept under the stars with the van doors wide open. Some days, she pulled over to help someone stranded on the side of the road. Not because she had to, because it felt right. The van had become more than a machine. It was a message in motion, a living echo of Lily's final wish. Keep moving, always. Back in Glenfield, the shop remained open, but it had changed. Mateo ran the day-to-day now, calling Claire only when he needed advice or to excitedly share that he'd rebuilt his first carburetor solo. The walls bore new photos. Kids learning how to change tires, women smiling under hoods, the first meeting of Grease and Grace, a local class Claire had quietly started for anyone who wanted to learn how to fix what life had left dented. But what no one knew, what Claire hadn't told a soul, was that before she'd left the expo, Lily's sister had handed her one final envelope, weathered, sealed with a wax stamp that bore the initials LM. It sat in the glove box for days, then weeks, until one quiet morning in the Smoky Mountains, Claire finally opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter, dated the 2nd of July, 1989. "If someone ever finishes this van, I hope you do it with love, because that's all I had left when I built it. Love for a woman, gone too soon. Love for the road that carried me through the worst. Love for a life I didn't get to finish. If you're reading this, then you've done something extraordinary. You've continued a story, and maybe found your own inside it. So thank you, for not selling it, for not stripping it, for not walking away. Thank you for building a home not just for me, but for yourself." Claire folded the letter with trembling hands. She pressed it to her chest and exhaled a breath that felt like it had been held since she was a child, kneeling beside her father's lift. That night, she returned to the place where it all started, the swamp. Dead Creek Bend looked the same, still overgrown, still buzzing with the hum of dragonflies and old ghosts. But now, it held no fear, only memory. She parked the Hiace just past the tree line and stepped into the mud barefoot, just to feel the earth that had once hidden so much. She brought nothing with her except the street. Christopher medal. She'd found in Lily's keepsake box, the one Joe had said belonged to Cora, and buried it beneath the same tree where the journal page had been found. No headstone, no plaque, just a whisper in the wind. Go as far as you can. Then, she got in the van, turned the key, and drove. No GPS, no map, no fear. Just forward. Because what the swamp tried to bury wasn't just a van. It was a story of courage, love, and the power of one woman's hands to make something live again. And now, it moved through the world 1 mile at a time, humming softly, carrying not just Lily's dream, but Claire's too. The road would never end. And that was exactly the point.